how many games does Baker Mayfield start this season?
It's a good question. I really think it's going to be dictated by their success. I would say, let's see, I think the bye is week 11, so I would say 5 or 6 is a safe bet.
Okay.
You know,
yeah.
if you just assume they're going to wait for the bye, which is sort of the old sort of standard, that's when we'll hand the keys over, when we can get him 2 weeks to prepare for his first start. I think that's reasonable. Here's the thing is, you know, it's a big debate here in town. Like, should Baker start week 1? If he's good enough, Russell Wilson did, Carson Wentz did, why shouldn't Baker? Well, they've traded a third-round pick for Tyrod Taylor. This is their plan, and unless Baker is John Elway reincarnate, they're not going to start in week 1, and they're going to try to ease him in. And they've been telling us that since they traded for Tyrod Taylor. I mean, Hugh Jackson took flack back in March or April or whenever when they made that deal because he immediately named the starter, and people are going, why do you have to commit to him right now? Well, it's because they traded a third-round pick for him, and because their plan for Baker is not to make him start day 1, and that would have been their plan for whoever it was they drafted first overall, provided it was a quarterback. So I think it would take some really, really crazy stuff happening for Baker to start any time before week 5 or 6. If the team's 0-6 at that point, Hugh Jackson's probably on his way out anyways. So then you start making those decisions. But as long as Hugh Jackson has any say in this, Tyrod Taylor is your starter because it's pretty clear he gives you a better chance to win right away. And, oh, by the way, Hugh Jackson's record is 1-31 as head coach. Like, he has to win very, very soon in order to protect his job.
No, yeah, because Tyrod Taylor, he was a playoff quarterback last year, and his best offensive weapon was Charles Clay, and he missed like half of the season. So right. I'm really interested to see how he's going to fit in, especially, I mean, Josh Gordon. Oh, man. I know hype's something to get carried away with, but just seeing all this stuff on Twitter about him, I'm really excited to see Tyrod throwing that deep ball over Gordon. Do you see, like, a scenario, though, where we don't see Baker Mayfield at all during this upcoming season?
I really can't. I mean, they would have to – their schedule is so tough, guys. We're all expecting them to be much better, but we're all expecting them to be 5 or 6 win team. So I think at some point the writing's going to be on the wall. You're out of the playoff race. Let's see what Baker gives you. I could also see, you know, let's say they're 5-5 through 10 weeks. Maybe, and this is what happened with Johnny Manziel, interestingly, maybe you talk yourself into, you know, Brian Hoyer / Tyrod Taylor isn't getting us over the hump. We're going to put the kid in there, and we're going to see if it makes us really, really good or really, really bad. Well, they made that mistake a couple of years ago. It was a different, it was a different group, obviously, a different front office regime. But here in Cleveland, it's not going to play very well if you're in the playoff race and Tyrod Taylor's playing well and you just bench him. Like, that's the chance to make the playoffs will rule the day. So that would be probably the only situation is if you're right about 500. And because I don't think there's any way this team goes 10-6 this year. This team is like, wow, we're a contender. They're not going to be Jacksonville this year, and that's okay. Like, all they have to do is take baby steps. They did not win a game last year, so anything over 4 wins, people are going to be stoked about.
Right.
So yeah, I really can't see any possibility that Tyrod plays the entire season, with the exception of them being way, way better than anybody expects. And again, the schedule's brutal. I mean, they start with Pittsburgh and New Orleans in the first 2 weeks, so they're going to be 0-2 almost definitely, and playing behind the 8 ball a little bit. So I think midseason, it'll hopefully for their sake, it'll be a pretty easy transition. And give both Tyrod Taylor, Baker Mayfield, and the front office credit. Like, everybody has, like, the front office has been really, really insistent. Tyrod's our guy until he's not. Like, right now, that's what's happening. And, you know, plans change, but this is our plan, and we'll let you know if the plan changes. And both Tyrod and Baker have handled it very, very well. So I think they targeted Tyrod because they knew he'd be able to handle that situation. And for him, you don't want to be the guy who bitches and moans as he gives up his job or doesn't, mentor Baker Mayfield properly, because he's playing for his next contract. He's hoping to be a starter somewhere. He's hoping to sign a long-term deal after this year. And that's not the type of guy he is, based on everything I've heard. Like, this is Dorsey said yesterday, he was on our airwaves yesterday, that's why I keep citing him. He was on 92.3, and he said going back to when Tyrod was coming out, I talked to Frank Beamer, and he said he's the best leader I've ever had in the history of Virginia Tech football. and as long as I've been involved in Virginia Tech. So for Beamer to say that at that point, that's the way Dorsey thinks about him. That's why Dorsey targeted him. He knows he's the ideal guy to, A, get this team some wins this year, but B, sort of gracefully hand the reins over to Baker.